Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Sean Roti. I'm an ASAP advisor based in the Ballybofey office. This evening's webinar will focus on nitrates regulations in relation to watercourses and farm roadways, and we'll also look at drying off. I would like to welcome and introduce both our speakers, Majella McCaffrey, Farm Profitability Specialist with Aurivo, and also Conor Maguire, Dairy Advisor based in Teagasc, Ballybofey. So before we commence proceedings, I would just like to remind the audience, if you want to submit a question, please do so using the Q&A tab function at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, can I ask Majella to unmute herself and share her screen to present?
Hi everyone, thanks very much for logging on tonight. I'm sure I've been out at a lot of groups over the region, and I'm sure some of this stuff will probably be a repeat, but hopefully you'll pick up something that maybe we missed at the groups. I've put an extra few slides in, so hopefully we're able to. I'm just going to share my screen here now, and we'll get started. So I've put in a few extra things anyway. Okay. Okay, so to start off, I suppose, working in the region, I thought this is a very important question to cover tonight. When I suppose we have high cell counts coming in, as an indicator to me or to any of the quality advisor or anyone that's working with the cows and somatic cell counts, the first thing that we would be looking at is to see, well, what is a cell count and what is it to the farmer? Although, yes, you get high cell counts, you get penalties from having high cell counts, and it is an indicator of milk quality, but it's also an indicator on the farm that there's a problem. I suppose looking at it here, I don't know if you can see the cursor's moving there. So looking at it here, this is a red blood cell, and this is a leukocyte. So what is a leukocyte? A leukocyte is a white blood cell. The white blood cells in your cow or in your animal or in your herd are high. What do white blood cells do? Over here to the right, you can have a look at the at two samples. One sample is a normal sample with normal amount of epithelial cells, which are skin cells, and also you can see the white blood cells here. So you have three different types of white blood cells. So what happens when something goes wrong in the herd or wrong in the animal, whether it's stress, mastitis, an infection, something that occurs within that herd, this is what happens. These white blood cells here, so these are epithelial cells, these white blood cells multiply and multiply, and then we've got an abnormal sample. What's happening here is that it's an indicator that the cell count is high, but it's also an indicator that there's something wrong. Those cells are fighting off something. So whether it's stress or infection or bacteria, there could be multiple reasons, but just as an indicator, this is what you're looking for. So high cell count means that they're fighting off something. So these white leukocytes here are fighting something, so they're fighter cells. I'll just go on to the next one here to cover this, why we're going through antibiotic resistance and why the new regulations are changing. So as you can see here, how antibiotic resistance actually happens within the cow. So those germs, I suppose, are here. All the cells are here, and we have one bacteria, we'll say. There's lots of germs and some are drug resistant. So we'll say if you've given antibiotics to heifers that are young, they have this bug, we'll say here, that is resistant. There's only one of them. The antibiotics then kill the bacteria. So it kills as well as the good bacteria. So it kills absolutely everything. So everything is dead, but then the drug that's resistant now has all the capabilities and it takes over the whole actual area. So then you build drug resistant bacteria in the actual cows. So it can actually horizontally transfer genes. So all they basically need, these bacteria, is to go up alongside each other and they will horizontally transfer genes. And that will give you the bacteria that are now resistant in all the herd. So basically the good germs that are there are killed with the antibiotics. There's no more fighting them off. And then the other bacteria that is resistant, which we started here at number 1, has now taken over. And this could be a gene that is resistant to amoxicillin or penicillin or something, you know, any of those active ingredients. And then the cow becomes resistant to that totally. So that's just a slight quick overview in the background of it. But I just wanted to explain how it actually happens. So if we go on here at a global level, and there's a lot of writing in this screen, I know, but I just wanted to go over it for you. At a global level, what is actually happening, or why are these regulations starting to come in, or what's actually happening? So the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, has declared that antimicrobial resistance is one of the top global public health threats facing humanity. So it requires urgent multi-sectoral actions in order to achieve sustainable development goals. So as we know, the globe has sustainable development goals, and one of them is antimicrobial resistance. So why is this? At the moment, it is a global health and development threat. So drug-resistant diseases could cause 10 million deaths by 2050. By 2030, 24 million people will be in extreme situations because of this bacteria and the antibiotic resistance against the drugs to cure the infections. So currently, there's 700,000 people dying each year due to drug-resistant drugs, including 230,000 of those people have multi-drug resistance. So it's not just one drug that they're resistant. There could be, we'll say, 5, 6, 7 different genes of different drugs, whether it's penicillin, amoxicillin, neomycin, whatever it is. 230,000 of those people died from multi-drug resistance at the moment, presently. In Ireland then, so we started at the globe, now we're going to Ireland. Antibiotic resistant superbugs, 219 deaths in Ireland each year at the moment. Ireland ranks 14th out of the 31 countries for a burden imposed by 5 of the most common antibiotic resistant bacteria across Europe. So we're already 14th out of 31 countries. And studies estimate that 33,000 people at present die in Europe each year from antibiotic resistance. So because of the global threat and because of all that has happened, the global WHO has decided that they would then make this one health system that we all need to collaborate in. So the one health system is doctors, human health, and the environment. So you can see here on the right-hand side, human health, animal health are interdependent. So it's one big circle. The whole lot is together. Antimicrobials and antibiotics, food, diet, intensive livestock farming, disease vectors, they become resistant. The environment, so the biodiversity, deforestation, air pollution, and climate change. But also human health is in this circle. So this is where the antibiotic resistance is then coming from. So as part of our sector, and as part of to try and do everything that we can possibly do, not alone is it profitable not to be using antibiotics that are resistant because they don't work, but it's also helping the human health and the aspect, because obviously by, I suppose, 2050, we don't want humans being resistant, because they would be in extreme situations, means that the basic infections that antibiotics is working on today will not work. So the next generation will have drug resistance. So that's one of the major areas we need to find. And I suppose that's going back a step to figure out, well, why is the regulations changing and why do we have to adapt to it? Even though it's profitable, it's a human health and animal health as well. So the upcoming farm changes then, I suppose in Europe, based on this and what's happened globally and in Europe, are the new ones coming up, which are pillars in the Irish law at the moment, which are starting on the 28th of January. So anybody can ask me any questions after this, but I'm going to try and cover it as quickly as I can here and explain it the best I can. At the moment, antimicrobial medicinal products shall not be used for prophylactic use other than in exceptional cases. So what does this mean? It means that prophylactic means that if you think a dry cow might need a blanket dry cow because it might get infected, then we can't use the dry cow tube on that. If the cow is infected, yes, we have the right tube, we have the right tube, we have the right bacteria, then we can use it. But we can't just give blanket dry cow tubes to everything because they might have a mastitis infection. So that basically means what prophylactic use is. A veterinary prescription for antimicrobial medicinal products shall be valid for 5 days from the date of issue. So you then have 5 days to get your antibiotics with your milk accordant and your cultural sensitivity testing done, and you 5 days then to pick up your antimicrobials to treat your infected cows. And after the 5 days, then it's not valid anymore. So you need to get another prescription. A veterinary prescription shall be issued only after clinical examination or any other proper assessment. So what we were working on was the proper assessment part of the health status of an animal or a group of animals by a veterinarian. This basically means your proper assessment is, it needs a clinical examination on farm, but your proper assessment will be your milk accordant data and will be your cultural sensitivity testing. And then you can get your antimicrobials based on your animals that need antimicrobial treatment and the ones that don't need it. So it's a basic transition because of this problem to milk accordant and transition from blanket dry cow therapy to selective dry cow therapy. And this is the reason why we want everybody to be looking at selective dry cow, is because of these problems. So if you're not milk accordant, now is the time to start milk accordant and using your data, not alone to give you profit on your farm, make your farm more efficient, but also so that you can make the decisions that you need to make based on data. So the milk accordant will show you the actual number of cows to be treated and the success of the previous year's dry cow treatment, which is a huge area. So we'll cover it slightly over in a few minutes, but really and truly your dry cow period is your time that you reduce your cell counts, your cows all heal, they get treated, and that's your time that you need to get them healed, ready for the following year. So the milk accordant will highlight the weakness and it'll allow you to address it before it becomes a problem. So you'll be able to see the patterns in your herd and how they're working, and you can address them rather than firefighting. You address them as you're going along, and it makes your system more efficient. The milk accordant will provide you with the information required to show that antibiotics are needed or not. Maybe you don't need antibiotics at all, which is money in your pocket. The regular milk accordant will allow you to build a picture of your herd and continuously improve. So it allows you to pick up the patterns and allows you to use the data that you have to make the best decisions. And then no more than looking back at the previous year's dry cow, we'll run through it in a second, but that will give you your percentages of how your dry cow went. And what do you think was the problems in the dry cow? When you have a percentage for 1 year, then you can make it more efficient for the following year and improve your practices every year. Regular milk, so will continuously improve. So you're improving every single year. You need the data to make correct decisions. Everybody needs data on the cows to be able to make the correct decisions, because a cow could walk past you in the morning and you wouldn't know it was infected, and you wouldn't know whether it had a high cell count or didn't have. Okay, if it's clinical, you can see it, but if it's not clinical, there could be 2 or 3 cows in that herd and they're causing you all the problems with cell count, and you need to address them and split up your herd accordingly to the milk accordant. If you have to provide evidence that you need to use dry cow tubes, which you will, because under the regulations you have to provide a suitable assessment or proper assessment, it'll give you a picture of the pattern of mastitis in your herd. So it's not really so much about your cell count results that you get today, it's building the patterns up from previously what happened with your cows. If you have a new infection rate is high and the use of blanket dry cow, this would indicate some areas of improvement. So if you've been given dry cow tubes throughout the last, we'll say, a couple of months, and you realize that you've got a high cell count problem, and you don't have the figures of how your blanket dry cow went, it would indicate practice problems. There's something going on that farm, or that area, or the sheds, or the cubicles, or something is going on there that's causing the problem. So rather than just giving the blanket dry cow and then not looking at your figures, it's trying to figure out what's going wrong in your blanket dry cow and how can I improve it, and how can I improve going forward to make it a better dry cow the following year. So this is basically a milk accordant. This is a farm, so one of the farms, and there's no name or anything on it there, but what I'm going to do is I'll have a look here at the number 44. So if we look at number 44 here, it'll give you her lactation date. So everybody has this report on the 6th. It gives her previous dry date, it'll give her calving date, it'll say what she was treated with, and it will say here the average previous cell count for the last lactation. So we're looking to find out what the pattern is with this cow. So you can see here on the 30th of October, 19, she was 378. She then went down to 44, 63, 70. She spiked up at 242 and 77. So she got a teat sealer only. Now, I'll have a look at this now in a few minutes and we'll show you what the dry cow period is. But if you could just remember the pattern of that cow there. So she was 378, 44, 63, 70, and then she went back out. Now, I don't have the data of whether she had a mastitis outbreak, whether it was clinical or whether this was just subclinical. So down here, you can look at 48. The pattern here, you can see 6 lactation, her previous dry date, the dry tube and the sealer. She was here, she started off in October at 278. She then went to 235, she went to 277, 133, and back to 643. So it's basically looking at those patterns. She got a dry cow tube and a sealer and trying to figure out each one of your cows individually on what's actually happened here or what's went on. Or whether they need an antibiotic or just a sealer on their own. So it's looking at all of those IDs on this side, you can see here, and it's figuring out the patterns of the cows to decide whether they go for selective dry cow or whether they get the tube. So that's what it's based on. So then I suppose after you have your cell count sorted out and you have picked out which ones is which and which ones you're going to give a tube to and which one you're going to give sealer to and what their patterns were, it's very good then to start looking at their performance. So everybody also has this, and there's a lot of reports on the ICBF that you can pull up, but I've just pulled these two up. So you can see here on the left hand side, so we'll see this cow number 10 that beforehand in that other report that we looked at, she was a problem cow. So she had mastitis outbreaks throughout the year. She was over 378. We're going to look at her tag number here. In this one, we're going to see what her breed is, her lactation is. We're also going to see how many milk kilos does she give you? What is her average fat and her protein percentage? What's her average cell count, all based on all the milk recordings you've done throughout the year? And how much did she give you? How many kilos did she give you in fat? How many kilos did she give you in protein? Now, the easiest way, as I would say to farmers, is compare them. Compare your cows. You're feeding them all the same diet, so compare them to see how much are they making you and how much money do you want to put into this cow to fix her cell count, or is she costing you money? So you can see here quickly the fat and the protein kilos, 630 kilos. This one is doing, and the next one to her is 518. The next one's 528. So the easiest way for farmers to do it is to compare each of their cows off each other, and you won't be long figuring out who's making you money and who's not. The next one that I'm looking at here, this is one of the most important ones, I suppose, in the cell check management reports. So the new infection rate over the dry cows. So this is the number of cows calved that had an SEC under 200,000 in the recording prior to calving, and then over 200 in the current recording. This is why, and we'll go over it quickly, that this is why it's so important to get in that milk recording now at your dry cow before you dry them off, because this is what it's based on. And the other one is under the 60 days after calving. So both of those are so important because this is what you're going to get. You're going to be able to figure out what happened in your dry period and what targets did you hit, how many cows healed, how many cows cured, how many cows calved down at over 200, and how many of your heifers did. So this is really your target and what you're at this year and how you're going to improve it. How do we improve these figures? We have to find out what went wrong or what happened in that dry cow period. So you can see here, heifers, the number of the heifers that are in a cell count under 200,000 in the current recording, which will be the one before we do for drying off, and then the one of the heifers calved. So you can see the target there is less than 15% because you don't want them calving down at over 200, and 40% of them calved down at over 200. So obviously this is a problem farm. The cure rate over the dry period. The number of cows that calved in a cell count over 200 in the recording prior to calving was 18, and over 200 in the current recording is 11. Our target is greater than 85. Now, you're going to be trying to get 90%, or at least, 90% that cured perfectly and didn't calve down at over 200. And you can see here on this farm, only 61% of them actually calved down that were cured. So you're looking for always greater than 85%. So this farm needs a lot of work to find out what actually happened in that dry cow period. Because if you start calving down at this is going to be a rolling effect throughout the year. And you now have to nearly firefight these to get the cure sorted and get the cell count down. So these are just some basic lines, I suppose, with the dry cow, what you're looking for, and I suppose target areas. They're not set in stone because every single farm is completely different. The cubicles, the stress levels, the lineman, the dry cow, everything is different. So these are just guidelines to go on, and then you need to start looking into the different areas and figure out, is there something going wrong, or how do you make these areas better? So over 200 cells per mil for the first lactation animals at any milk recording is subclinical mastitis. Antibiotic treatment may not be required for individual cows with the cell count consistently under 100,000 and no history of clinical. There are good clinical mastitis records. Milk culture results is extremely important. You know what bacteria you have, you know what antibiotic is going to work, and you've at least 4 milk recordings. I'd definitely be going for 5 because I'd be trying to get that one in now before the dry cow period, so that you'll have that report next year with your cows calving down, and you can try and make it more efficient or see how you got on. The bulk milk tank cell count is consistently under 200,000 cells per mil. Clinical mastitis in the herd is under 2%, and the recent rate of infection in the herd is under 5%. And you'll get these in the cell check summary, which is a different report, but it will tell you what the cell count is, and it'll also, that dry cow one as well, will be in your cell check report. So another one then, I suppose, looking at the performance side, so you're crossing over between your performance and how you're going all the time. So you're looking here, this herd has 2% of them low performers and they're not profitable at all. The average performers profitable is 14%, and then the best performers are the most profitable. So I suppose you're then going to group in those in to see who's making you the most money, the average performers, and who's making you the best money. And that's how you kind of decide, what are we going to do with these cows? We're going to keep them on for another year. Are we going to feed them? What butterfats, what proteins, what breeding is in them, what fertility is in them? And there's a breakdown of that herd production profile, and it'll tell you the tag numbers, and it'll tell you exactly how much those fat and protein and fertility is. And that's in another report. It's just a breakdown of this one. This will also tell you here the production summary, the top 20% of the milk and recording herds. So it'll tell you what they're doing, and it'll tell you your average and what you're doing. So you can see here, even in this farm, the percentage of cows over 200,000 plus is 11, and the top 20% milk recording herds in the country is 7. So the fats, the proteins, and the total solids here, you can see yourself, you can actually benchmark yourself. Now, there is a discrepancy in that depending on the system, when the cows calve, but on average, it's a fairly good benchmark. But you'd have to look at when the cows calved and when they come into lactation, because if there's longer days in the lactation, or groups of them that are kind of out, then that's where you need to be looking at. So I suppose the start of calving there, as I said, this is the most important one. And then you're looking at the herd dried off. You want all of these as much as you possibly can. The more you have, the more efficient, the more you have, the more efficient you have. But these two are the main ones for driving down the cell count. Carry out your regular milk recording with a minimum of 4. I would definitely be saying 5, and maintain a monthly bulk tank SEC of less than 200,000. Regular monitoring your milk recording profile with an SEC greater than 100,000 cells per mil throughout. Record your mastitis cases. Really, really important to record your mastitis cases throughout the year, whether it's in a notebook or what it's in. Record them so you can look back and say, well, this cow's pattern was this, and she had 2 or 3 outbreaks of mastitis, so I'm going to then decide on what I'm going to do with her. And I suppose that's really what I kind of wanted to go over today. And I can take any questions at the end. There's no problem at all. But I don't want to hold up any more of the time. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll leave it at that.
That's great, Majella. Thanks very much. So Conor, I can ask you to start sharing your screen and unmute yourself. Swap, yeah. That's perfect. Work away.
Yep, no bother. All right, folks, as Sean mentioned, my name is Conor Maguire, and I'm a dairy advisor here in the Ballybofey office. This presentation tonight is just going to go over a bit on the new measures of the nitrates regulations that had to be effective from all of 2021, and kind of focusing on waterways and roadways. So look, I'll push on here. Look, the new nitrates regulations, the new measures are effective from the 1st of January this year. and they were broke down into greater than 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare prior to exports. And our third one applies to all holdings. So our first one of the whole farm stocking rates of 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare prior to exports falls under three categories. And they're the maximum crude protein content allowed and concentrate feedstuff. The second one is implementation of a alignment program. And third is the use of low emission slurry spreading. So look, the maximum crude protein content allowance and concentrate feedstuffs. From the 1st of April this year to the 15th of September, you're only allowed to feed 15% crude protein meal. All right. The big one to watch here is keep the records of all your feedstuffs, all your dockets, and make sure the statements have the crude protein percentage clearly displayed on it for any inspections. The implementation of the alignment program. A alignment program should be prepared and must be established the following: a lime application program for the farm, a calculation of liming requirements for each parcel to achieve optimum pH. Look, how do we go about that? We have to take our soil samples to start with. An NMP plan has to be done online. And then with the results that we get from the NMP and their soils, we have to spread lime, all right, to the optimum rates that are required. The use of the low emission slurry spreading equipment. From the 15th of April of this year, low emission slurry spreading equipment must be used for all applicants of slurry on the holding with a whole farm stocking rate of 170 kilos nitrogen to the hectare or above prior to the export of livestock manures. Another key one on this is keep the records again of any contractors that have spread slurry through low emission slurry spreading. So you need to keep dockets, volumes, quantities of slurry that was recorded. Coming on to the main ones now that we're kind of going to concentrate more on the waterways was exclusion of bovines from watercourses. All right. So where bovine livestock have direct access to water from the holding, a fence should be placed at least 1.5 meters from the top of the riverbank to the water's edge by the 1st of January 2021. All right. It will be permissible to move livestock across a watercourse to an isolated land parcel where necessary, provided that both sides of the watercourse are fenced. So if we look at the pictures down here, on the first one, on the right hand side, on the left hand side corner, there's a picture, and we have a watercourse running along here, and we have our fence 1.5 meters back. Our middle picture is kind of what we're trying to avoid. We don't want cattle congregating around waterways, rivers and streams and drinking out of them. And again, the picture on the right hand side is another prime example of fenced back from the river 1.5 meters. So what is the definition of a watercourses and waters? Watercourses can be found on the Ordnance Survey website, all right, on a scale of 1:5,000. And all watercourses will be marked in a continuous solid blue line. Waters, every watercourse, river, stream, dry drain, dike, shaw, lakes, etc. is basically anything that can convey water. Exclusion of bovines from the watercourses. Again, it's effective from the 1st of January this year. All fences at least 1.5 meters from the top of drains to the stream bank. Existing fence will not suffice. So an existing fence will not suffice if it's 1 meter from the top of the bank. It has to be 1.5 meters back. For farmers with grassland stocking rates greater than 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare in a previous year. Bridges and culverts do not require 1.5 meter fencing, as there's no direct access to the watercourses. All right. Temporary fencing can be used here. All right. As well as permanent fencing. Crossing of streams. This might be a familiar picture down here on the bottom left-hand corner throughout the years of cattle crossing drains and rivers like that. It is permitted to access an isolated land parcel through a watercourse. Livestock are not allowed unrestricted access when crossing watercourses. So basically this picture on the bottom right-hand corner, we have a watercourse, but as you can see here on both sides, it's fenced. They can't get up or down that stream. They have to go across. Close off access points once animals have moved across the stream. So there should be a wire pulled across again, so those animals can't get back into it and dropped again when they're walking across. This is also a requirement under good agricultural practice regulations. And install a bridge or culvert where possible. Livestock bridges for crossings, watercourses. Here we have an example of a few different types of bridges for crossing waterways. We have concrete ones, slabs crossing here, with culverts, different options, different ideas. The main one thing is they have to be supported on either side of the waterway only. So it can't be any beams, pillars or shores supporting in the middle of the waterway. It has to land on both sides of the watercourse only. Obviously, precast is the cheapest in the long term, and there's very little maintenance with it. Bridges and culverts designed to take the maximum flood flows, so you have to take that into consideration. The volume of water that's coming down the waterways. You should not allow for overtoppling during flooding events. Also, it's advisable to put a wee lip or a ridge across them to channel water to keep it from coming in when the cows are crossing them bridges. If you are thinking of putting bridges across, there's a few things that you need to look at within legislation to do with rivers. It is an offence under the Fisheries Act to disturb the bed or gravel of streams from mid-September to mid-May, where fish may spawn or have already spawned. Contact should be made with inland fisheries. Earliest possible stage and planning and design process where work such as road construction installed over culverts and bridges, the crossing of streams and rivers with pipelines and works on the environs of waters are planned. So basically, a consultation is advisable before you start any of that with Fisheries Board. Planning permission also is very important and may be required. And the National Parks and Wildlife may also need to be contacted. It's just a few things that if anybody is thinking of putting bridges or culverts in, all these things should be taken into consideration before going ahead. Another one of the regulations is setback distance of supplementary drinking points. All right, the two photos again, they speak a lot for themselves. We have on the left-hand photo at the bottom here, we have a waterway across here. Our fence is across. It's probably not 1.5 meters back, but also the drinker. All right. Supplementary drinking points may not be located within 20 meters of surface water from the 1st of January 21. And this also applies to nose pumps. All right. And I know some fields you mightn't get to 20 meters in it. I suppose you just have to put it back as far as we can away at the furthest point from the water source. Again, this photo on the right hand side, we have a stream or waterway running across here. It's fenced off. The roadways are fenced off. Everything's fenced off that way. But again, we have the big water throw here, and it wouldn't be 20 meters away from that road or from that stream. And this applies to all holdings. This one is the prevention of direct discharge from farm roads and the amendment of the 89 kilos of excretion figures for the dairy cow. Prevention of direct discharge from roadways. So basically, they're saying is there shall be no direct runoff of soil water from farm roadways to waters on the 1st of January 21. The occupier of such a holding shall comply with the minimum specification of farm roadways. The current specification is 119, July 2020. Okay. So here we have the farm roads. Firstly, you need to understand what you're asked to do within these legislations. Identify sections of farm roads affected. They're not all going to be affected, so they're not. All right. So you'll know yourselves when you're on your own farms what roads, what points on them roads are going to be affected, where they need to be looked at, where there's work to be done on them. Consider how best to meet the requirements. So it's worth sitting down, walking through it, planning it out, seeing what ways is best to tackle this. And implement the modifications in. So farmers are asked to prevent sediment and nutrient runoff from farm roadways to waters. That's basically what they're asking to do. Thereby, by doing that, you're protecting and improving water quality. All right, so there's no sediment or excretion from the cows getting into waterways. All right, by doing this. So basically, we have our sources, the cows. They're walking on the road, cow roads, paths. They're excreting down to the ground. It's hitting the pathways, and then with natural falls on the ground, it's getting into the waterways, and it's causing the nutrient pollution. So what farm roadways are affected, basically? Who does this apply to? It applies to all farms and all farm roadways adjoining any kind of drain or water course, even if dry for part of the year. So effectively, if it has the potential to carry water at all. Includes all roadways used for cows, cattle, sheep, machinery, and tillage farms. Farm roadways across any drain, watercourse, river, even if it's dry for part of that year. This applies to all roads beside waters. Waters include all rivers, watercourse, streams, dry drains, lakes, and anything that can convey water, basically. If the roadway is within 1.5 meters of the top of the bank of a watercourse, there needs to be fences on both sides of the waterway and the runoff directed away from the watercourse into the field. So here we have an example of an existing farm roadway adjacent to water. And it's we're showing what has to be done on an existing farm roadway. So roughly our road there is about 4 meters long. Here's our existing roadway underneath. And here's the water course. So basically there's a crossfall of 1 in 25 crossfall to put into that road to throw the water to the other side away from the drain. All right. On top of the existing roadway, we'll have to put some sort of substone, about 210 mil at the highest point, and then a blinding, with 50 mil blinding on top of that again. Important for cows, not too rough, not too hard. An existing fence is sufficient if beside waters as buffer margin of 1.5 not required. However, best practice would be at least 1.5. So look, if that's an existing road and it's less than 1.5 meters, there's not much we can do about it. We just have to crossfall it and direct the water off. If it can be moved back to 1.5, that's best practice if there's room there to do it. If the roadway is within 1.5 of the top of the bank of a watercourse, there needs to be fences on both sides of the roadway and the runoff directed away from the watercourses into the field. There must also be an earthen bank between the roadway and the watercourse. Road must be cambered away and requirements of measure met. So basically, if it's cambering away, where does the water go? And is it polluting anything else? It has to be cut. So here we have an existing farm road and a fence and a buffer margin. All right. So there's work to be done to that road. All right. As you can see, you have the drain here, an existing road and the fences. Naturally, it's going to be cambered to both sides over time. So that has to be crossfall to the other side. Another example of a road modification requirements, we have a drain across here, or waterway, and the arrows are indicating the falls on the road. So it's falling back the way, it's falling here, and it's falling into the stream. So what are the modifications would be required here? The drain, as we said, is on the right-hand side, the blue line. Slope the road to the field. So we're going to slope or camber the road to the field here. Remove the soil on the field side to allow for the flow off the road. So we're taking that height of soil off there, taking it off there, and using that soil on the other side of the road to build a Kerbera bank to protect the waterway, to channel it away from it on the other side, and fence off. Farm roads with slopes. Divide and conquer to prevent large volumes of water flowing down slopes. As you can see from this picture here on the right, on the left-hand side, roads that are sloped and carrying large volumes of rainwater, surface water, they're shore-on roads. They create channels and gorges. Install regular diversion ramps. All right. So basically, you're putting diversion ramps at angles to catch smaller areas and channeling them away, instead of all coming down to one at the bottom and channeling it. Divide it up into sections on the slope. Divert runoff into fields. Will reduce the volume and energy of run off at the bottom of the roadway in the stream. As I said, it'll reduce the risk of gorging and channeling into that. Farm roads connected to waters. Again, we have another few issues here in this picture. All right, so you have to identify the issues with the road or the bridge. Are these waters or watercourses? And what options does the farmer have here? Potential issues on this. Runoff from the farm road to the river, as indicated here. The farm road, the bridge over the river, run off directly into the river. There's no lip or no nib here. All right, so runoff can directly go into that waterway. It's sloping back. The possible options: raise the bank to prevent runoff across here. Raise this bank. Build a wall on either side of the concrete bridge to stop the runoff from going over into the waterways. Bank a wall linked to prevent seepage at this point here. Seepage is going to come down, we're going to be running in there. Runoff from a bridge can be piped away to a field, build a settlement area, or relocate the bridge or the roadway. Another example of a road that needs works. a roadway. Again, we have the river up here. So an option is to create a soil bank across here. And we also see that this bank is higher than the ground level here. So it's another obstacle. So once we have the bank up, fence it off, recamber on the road, slope it appropriately, and 1:25 fall away from the river over to the other side. And as I said, once we fall it to there, we'll have a problem as the road is lower than that bank level there. Outlet channels to the field at intervals as the bank on the right hand side is higher than the road. Settlement areas. Settlement areas are something some of you could be thinking of, or that could be problems on roadways that can't get channeled off. Settlement areas require fencing for safety. Can be occasionally grazed or devoted to wildlife. Provide access for cleaning by a digger because they have to be cleaned out every so often when the silt and sediment builds up on them. Recommended for professional design and installation. All right, there's specialist companies out there that design settlement areas. So we have an example here of a settlement area. This is the farm roadway, and there's a bridge here. There's a river. It's sloping down to the farmyard. So we're going to have water to catch before it comes to the bridge. An option, as we say, the settlement ponds. So when we see, we could put our divert or ramps to divert the water, 2 ramps, and we have 2 gully points here. When water's coming here, it's catching in front of the ramp and catching in front of this ramp. From there, at the gully points, and then both piped into a settlement pond. All right. Within that settlement pond is about 12 meters long and 4.5 meters wide. And also there's a buffer zone where it has to be kept back 6 meters and 3 meters for the pond from the river. Within that settlement pond and so on, there's basically 3 chambers. So we have at the top here, we have a section of the settlement pond. We have inlet pipe, as we said, coming off the gullies where we're catching the water off the ramps. It's coming in, and we can create 3 chambers within this with earth banking. So the water's coming in, dirty water's caught off the road. It's coming into the first chamber. It gets time to settle. Silt and sediment as it sits at the bottom, rises over. A small bit more silt and sediment is coming. And once it comes into the third chamber, it should be relatively clean water. From there, we have an outflow and a percolation area. All right, the percolation area is nearly 1.2 meters wide, and the pond should be about 1.5 meters deep. So there's substantial depth in what these ponds, and as we say, livestock should be fenced off. But it's also very important to have access to get in to clean them ponds out. And the silt and sediment has to be cleaned out of them too. The nitrate regulations regarding the amendment to the 89 kilos of excretion figure for the dairy cow. So why is this figure changed? You're asking. Well, the reasoning behind it is the average milk yield has increased significantly since the regulations were originally introduced in 2006. And based on current scientific advice, the most accurate figure is 89 kilos. And this figure is already used by the EPA when reporting for Ireland's greenhouse gas inventory. And that's it. I'd like to thank you for listening.
That's great, Conor. Maybe just stop sharing your screen there. Majella, you can turn on your camera there now. Good. So a few questions on there, Majella. I suppose the first one there in relation to selective cow therapy. If you're looking at the cure rate for last year, how important is that when coming to making a decision for this year and whether you go ahead and use that or not? comparing that with your milk recordings throughout the year?
Yeah, so I suppose your cure rate last year is how many cows actually cured. So if they had a cell count throughout the year, you're looking at how many cured and why did they not cure? Is it because of the cubicles? Is it because of the management? Is it because of the actual practice of drying off? So sometimes cows can get infected at drying off, depending on the actual practical drying off time. So what you're looking at is you're looking at that figure, and then you're looking throughout the year to see, well, what was the patterns in those cows? What was the cell counts in them? And then trying to figure out, well, where is the problem coming from? Is it coming at drying off? Where is the areas? Is there a cubicle problem? Are we liming? You know, all the different areas. You need to have a look into them and then figure out how you're going to get that percentage down. And the only way you do that is by looking at the practices on the farm. Because by giving antibiotics, it can cure them now, or doing the blanket dry cow, but the problem is still there, still underneath it. So it's to try and figure out, how do you solve this, or what's actually going on with these animals that's making them, well, it could be resistance either. That's another thing. You could give them the tubes and the resistance could be there and they didn't cure at all. So there's a number of different factors you have to look at throughout the farm, but it's looking in detail and seeing, how can I improve these figures? What's going on?
And on that note, I suppose, why would the cure rate be low?
Okay, so there is a good few reasons. I suppose every single farm is different, every different practices. So as I said there, the practical drying off of the cows is a major thing. So actually drying each individual cow off, the culture and sensitivity testing is invaluable. That gives you what bacteria that these cows are now infected with. So it's telling you on that, it's telling you in the last milk recording before the dry cow that we get in now, it's telling you what the pattern has been throughout the year. But then you're also got the culture and sensitivity testing, which is telling you to get the right tube that'll treat the right bacteria and see if there's any resistance in the herd. If that isn't the case and you're not resistant to antibiotics, then you have to look at the practices in the management. So the cubicles, the liming, the actual practical drying off of the cows, how it's done, and evaluating everywhere that they could possibly have got infected in that dry cow period.
Okay, another one there. How many cows would you be recommending dry off in a day? Or
okay, so due to it's actually got nothing to do with the cows at all. This question comes up a lot. I'd be recommending that you're doing 3 to 4 cows properly. And if you're on the 5th or the 6th one, by human error, it says there's been trials done that if you're doing 8, 9, 10, 12 cows all at once, if you can say that you've done the first 1 or 2 exactly the same as you've done the last one on the row, with say of 12, number 11 and number 12, exactly the same as you done number 1 and number 2, those trials have been shown that just by human error, by continuously doing 12 cows, by the time you get to the last 3, 4, 5, 6, you're starting to get sick of it and you're starting to lose your own human error, and that's where you create the problems, and that's the actual practicalities of it.
okay, Conor, one there on temporary fencing of the water courses, will that suffice? I'm just thinking along the fund, for example, which periodically floods. Does those water courses need to be permanently fenced, or will the pigtails and wire suffice, or what's the advice on that?
Yeah, the pigtails and the wire will suffice there, Sean, so it will. If it is flood ground, as long as it's fenced in such a way that when cattle are on it, that they cannot access that waterway, that will suffice.
Okay, and just make reference again to the OSI, the maps with the blue lines. Anyone who wants to check it.
Yep. The website to check that is www.osi.ie, and you have to go to a scale as 1:5,000, and it's all continuous blue lines are identified that need to be fenced this year.
Okay, another one there. A lot of fields, they don't have the 20 meters. They don't have the water truss 20 meters away from the water course. And I suppose you covered it earlier on. What's the advice in relation to that one?
Look, the fields that haven't got the 20 meters, just get the water truck to the furthest away point as practically as possible.
Yeah. That's grand. Yeah. So look at I'm afraid we're out of time, folks. I would like to thank both our speakers, Majella and Conor, and would also like to thank you for tuning in tonight. And I would just like to mention that there's a Teagasc, in conjunction with Aurivo, are holding a winter milk event on the farm of Garrett Porter, Castlefin. And that's on Tuesday, the 16th November at 11:30 a.m. So that's Tuesday, the 16th, 2 weeks today, this morning. So topics to include breeding and genetics, winter feed, labour, carbon footprint, milk quality. So we're back again next week, folks, 8 o'clock. Next week's webinars focusing on cattle and sheep rations. So until then, a very good night and thank you for tuning in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.